In the deep woods of Ohio, where I've served as a national park ranger for 2 decades, there's an unspoken rule that could very well save your life. If you ever come across a lost child while wandering the trails, don't approach them. Don't even utter a word to them. Your best course of action is to promptly turn around, walk away, and inform a ranger. This may sound harsh, but in these parts, we've had our fair share of disappearances, and we can't afford any more. Always keep your own family in mind. Wouldn't you want other hikers to do the same for your children? Over the years, my job has exposed me to the raw beauty and the harsh realities of nature. I've weathered storms, navigated through treacherous terrain, and helped countless hikers who've lost their way or gotten injured. The outdoors, with all its challenges, is where I feel most at home. Yet, despite all my experience and my love for the wilderness, nothing could have prepared me for the chilling incident that occurred a few years back. To this day, when I hear similar stories, a shiver runs down my spine. It was an early November day, the kind where the overcast sky seems to press down on you, heavy with the threat of winter. I had just finished some routine trail maintenance when a woman, her appearance wild and eyes red-rimmed from tears, stumbled towards me. Her clothes were smeared with dirt, and she seemed utterly out of sorts. I quickly approached her, concerned, and asked if she was all right. Her response was initially a jumbled mess of words, but as she gradually calmed down, the story came out. She'd been hiking alone, enjoying the solitude, when a faint sound of crying pierced the air. Curious and concerned, she followed the sound and discovered a young boy, seemingly around 5 or 6 years old, sitting alone on the forest floor, his sobs breaking the quiet of the woods. It was alarming to see a child that young unaccompanied in such a remote area. She approached the boy, her voice soft with concern, asking if he was lost, but the boy just kept crying, unresponsive to her questions. Hoping to console him, she knelt beside him and gently touched his shoulder, but his tears didn't cease. "Let's find your parents," she offered, but the boy remained silent, only drying his tears before standing up to follow her. As they walked, she tried to engage him in conversation, hoping to gather some information, his name, his parents' names, when he last saw them. But the boy was oddly reticent, only mentioning that he lived in a nearby house. This didn't make sense. The park was far from any residential areas, and the notion of a nearby house was implausible. The woman assumed it was just the boy's young mind not understanding the concept of distance. Their journey back to the trail was fraught with difficulty. The boy seemed strangely averse to leaving the forest, insisting that his parents' house was just a little further in the woods. He even attempted to pull her deeper into the forest, away from the trail. When she resisted and tried to lead him back, the boy's strength was unnerving. He pulled at her so fiercely that she felt her shoulder strain under his grip. This was when panic set in. She managed to free herself, and driven by fear, she ran until she finally found the trail where I encountered her. I escorted her out of the woods and agreed to search for the boy. Admittedly, I was skeptical of her story. The wilderness can play tricks on your mind, especially when you're alone, tired, and possibly dehydrated. However, the possibility of a child lost in these woods couldn't be ignored. This resonated deeply with me, as my own sister Sky had been missing for over 3 years. The thought of another family going through that agony spurred me into action. Sky's disappearance had left an indelible mark on our family. She hadn't vanished in these woods, but during a solo road trip, a journey she had meticulously planned as the first step towards her dream of global travel. The lack of leads was maddening. We spent agonizing months in the city where she was last seen, working tirelessly with local authorities, clinging to the faintest hope of a clue. But eventually, life's relentless pace forced us to return home, each day marked by an aching void where Sky should have been. This personal tragedy was a constant reminder of the pain of not knowing, a pain I vowed to spare other families from if I could. With that resolve, I set off in the direction the woman had indicated. I scoured the area, my eyes and ears attuned to any sign of the boy, but as time ticked by, my search seemed increasingly futile. With no reports of a missing child and the sun dipping lower in the sky, I began to doubt the woman's account. Maybe it was just a trick of the mind, a shadow cast by the forest's solitude. But just as I was about to turn back, a faint sound of laughter pierced the stillness. I followed the sound, my steps cautious, until I saw him, a young boy, absorbed in his simple play with rocks and twigs. "Hey there," I called out gently. "What's your name?" He glanced up briefly, a timid smile flickering across his face, before resuming his play. I tapped his shoulder lightly, trying to engage him, but to my surprise, he sprung up, tapped my arm and exclaimed, "Tag, you're it!" before darting away. Chasing him through the trees, my breath grew heavy. My 40s were catching up with me. The boy's agility was remarkable, weaving through the forest with an ease that seemed almost unnatural. Just as I thought I had him within reach, he slipped into a cave opening, vanishing from sight. I cursed under my breath. The sun was setting, and the cave, an uninviting abyss, loomed before me. I had to follow him in. "This isn't a game anymore," I shouted into the darkness, my voice echoing off the cave walls. The silence that followed was deafening. My flashlight revealed a network of tunnels, each one an ominous path into the unknown. I chose the left tunnel, my unease growing with every step. Caves had always unsettled me. The isolation, the enveloping darkness. My light danced across the cave walls, revealing the vastness of the chamber I had stumbled into. Then, something caught my eye, a white figure near the ceiling. I shone my light back at it, and what I saw defied explanation. It was enormous, easily 6 feet in length, with an even larger wingspan. Its appearance was grotesque, a nightmarish blend of a giant moth and human-like limbs, its pale skin almost luminous in the dark. Its face was hidden from view, and as I tried to retreat, I heard it stir. The creature launched itself towards me, its wings generating a terrifying buzz that drowned out all other sounds. It was unlike any wildlife I had encountered in all my years in the park, a chilling amalgam of insect and human, its scream a haunting melody of agony and fear. In a desperate attempt to defend myself, I hurled a rock at it. The creature plummeted to the ground, its screams echoing through the cave. The glimpse I caught of its face still haunts me, glowing red eyes, devoid of any human characteristic, just glaring, ominous orbs. I raced out of the cave, clambering back to the surface. Panting, heart pounding, I stopped to catch my breath. The image of the monstrous creature etched permanently into my memory. Reeling from my encounter with the unearthly creature in the cave, I struggled to regain my composure. My heart still raced, the image of those glowing red eyes etched into my mind. As I steadied myself, I spotted the boy again. He was clambering up a tree with the ease and carefree spirit of a child, unburdened by the fears of the world. "Hey," I called out to him. "I know this is fun for you, but it's getting late. Your parents must be worried. Let's go find them, okay?" To my surprise, the boy nodded and began his descent. I tried to engage him in conversation as we walked, asking his name and where his parents were. His response was vague, pointing in a direction I knew couldn't possibly be right. The deep forest around us was devoid of any residential structures. Despite this, I urged him to follow me, hoping to guide him to safety. Initially, he complied, but his attention was soon captured by a stream. He dashed towards the water, splashing and playing with a child's innocence. I attempted to lure him away with snacks from my lunch, but he remained uninterested, instead gleefully declaring, "You're still it," and darted off across the stream's stepping stones. With a heavy sigh, I followed, but my agility wasn't what it once was. I slipped, falling face first into the water. A sharp pain shot through my leg as I realized I had gashed it on a rock. Blood mixed with the stream's waters, turning them a deep red. Cursing under my breath, I saw the boy reach the opposite bank and disappear into the trees. With my injury and his lack of cooperation, I knew I needed help. Extracting myself from the water, I managed to bandage my leg with the first aid supplies I always carried. My phone, unfortunately, had gotten wet and was now unresponsive. Frustrated and in pain, I berated myself for the recklessness of my actions. I attempted to walk, but only managed a few steps before collapsing. As darkness approached, my situation grew more desperate. I heard a bird chirping overhead, but its song was off, almost like a whistling kettle. Overcome by exhaustion, I closed my eyes, burying my head in my hands. When I opened them again, my surroundings had inexplicably changed. I was indoors, in a bed, in a quaint, sunlit cottage. My legs still ached, but the pain was more bearable, and it was neatly bandaged. A wooden walking stick rested beside the bed. Confused, I stood up, using the stick for support. I explored the small, charming house, calling out a tentative "hello" as I went. Moments later, I heard the front door open. A stunning blonde woman in her 30s entered, her presence radiating warmth and friendliness. Dressed in a light blue gingham dress, she carried a basket filled with berries and herbs. "Hey, I'm glad to see you're up," she greeted me with a smile. "You were in pretty bad shape when I found you yesterday. My name's Haven." Stunned, I managed to introduce myself as Jason. We shook hands, her grip firm yet gentle. My mind raced with questions about where I was, how I got there, and most importantly, who was Haven, this enigmatic savior who had appeared out of nowhere. When Haven explained how she found me, her story was simple yet unusual. She had been out for a walk and stumbled upon me lying unconscious. Acting on instinct, she brought me back to her home to help. I expressed my gratitude but couldn't help questioning why she hadn't taken me to a hospital. Her response was a mix of skepticism and practicality. "Why pay a fortune for something I can do just as well for free?" she asked, her eyes questioning. It was clear from her tone that she believed in a more natural way of healing. Our conversation revealed Haven to be a free spirit, a modern-day hippie, so to speak. She had never attended public school, preferring the teachings of nature to those of a classroom. Her lifestyle was one of self-sufficiency, living off the land and eschewing modern conveniences like supermarkets and conventional medicine. It didn't surprise me then to learn she didn't own a phone. She did, however, agree to drive me back to town, but only after I had joined her for breakfast. As we talked over breakfast, she poured me a cup of tea. The conversation was pleasant, but I started feeling unusually drowsy. The next thing I knew, I was waking up back in the bedroom, and it was dark outside. The window was too small to offer an escape route. Creeping out of the room, the house was eerily silent. I noticed another door across the hall and wondered if it led to Haven's room. My mind felt foggy, making it hard to focus. Something felt off. The front door was locked from the inside. Then, a scratching noise drew my attention to a door near the kitchen. I approached cautiously and heard a faint, distressed voice crying for help. The door was locked, but after rummaging through drawers and cabinets, I found a ring of keys. It took several attempts, but I finally unlocked the door. To my shock, the boy from the woods was at the bottom of the basement stairs, tears streaming down his face. She locked me down here," he whimpered. I whispered reassurances, but he seemed paralyzed by fear, moving further into the basement. Reluctantly, I followed him down into the dimly lit space. The basement was lined with shelves holding dozens of glass jars containing small, orb-like objects. As I moved closer, a sickening realization hit me. They were eyes in various stages of decay. My heart raced with fear and revulsion. Near the back of the basement, a hole in the ground caught my eye, with a rope made of human hair hanging into it. The thought of how much hair was required for such a rope made my stomach churn. I needed to get the boy and myself out of there. When I tried to pick him up, he resisted, sinking to the floor in tears. "We need to leave now," I urged him, but he only continued to cry, muttering apologies. "Why are you apologizing?" I asked, confused and alarmed. "She makes me bring her people," he sobbed. My hands trembled as I asked who she was. "Mom," he whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine. I pressed for more information, but the boy remained silent, only pointing towards the hole in the ground. I hobbled back up the stairs, my injured leg protesting with each step, only to find the door now locked. Desperation mounting, I returned to the basement, my mind racing with fear and confusion about what Haven and this seemingly innocent child were truly capable of. In the chilling silence of the basement, the boy, Tim, had seemingly disappeared into thin air. The only other place he could have gone was a small, closet-like room off to the side. The door creaked on its hinges as I cautiously peered inside. What I initially mistook for neatly hung suits, covered in plastic, revealed a horrifying truth under the flick of a light switch. They were human skins. I fought back a scream, my stomach churning. I shut the door quickly and doubled over, retching from the sickening realization. After several minutes, I managed to steady my breathing and began to pace the basement, my mind racing. I was trapped in the house of a mad woman, a predator who used her own child to lure unsuspecting victims to their gruesome end. The remoteness of the house, hidden deep in the woods, only added to my sense of hopelessness. She killed people, skinned them, and then disposed of their remains in a hole in the basement. But the question that haunted me was, why? Searching for answers, I noticed a desk stacked with books. I sifted through them, hoping for some clue to escape this nightmare. Instead, I found bizarre images and creatures straight out of a horror story, including a depiction of the moth-like entity I had encountered in the cave. The books also contained unnervingly detailed drawings of human anatomy, as if for medical study. Suddenly, I heard the door at the top of the stairs. In a panic, I dove behind some barrels, holding my breath. Haven's voice echoed in the basement, calling out for Tim. Their conversation was muffled, but it sounded like she was interrogating him about my whereabouts. He denied seeing me. She muttered something under her breath and headed towards the closet with the human skins. Peering through a gap between the barrels, I watched in horror as Haven pulled out one of the skins and slipped into it like a grotesque costume. She chanted in an unfamiliar language, and the skin contorted and reshaped around her, transforming her into a large, muscular man. Dressed in jeans and a flannel top, she soon left the house. After waiting to ensure she was gone, I emerged from my hiding spot, only to be startled by Tim. He offered his help, and in my desperation, I agreed to follow him. He suggested our only escape was through the hole in the ground, using the rope made of human hair. The thought of it made my skin crawl, but I had no choice. We descended into the underground tunnels, Tim advising me to dim my flashlight and keep quiet. The tunnels stretched endlessly, a labyrinth beneath the earth. As we moved forward, I began to hear an additional set of footsteps, not on the cave floor, but unnervingly close to the wall beside us. I looked up, fear gripping me as I tried to discern the source of the sound in the oppressive darkness of the tunnel. The dark, winding tunnels of the underground labyrinth had already presented horrors beyond comprehension, but the sight on the cave wall added a new layer of fear. A large, unsettling creature, around 7 feet in length and covered in human-like skin, was crawling along the wall. Its shape was a grotesque deviation from anything human, flat body and head, almost square-shaped, moving on 10 spindly legs. I watched, horrified, as it scaled the ceiling above us, moving with an eerie grace. I quickened my pace, fearing it might drop down on us. I wanted to ask Tim about this monstrosity, but I couldn't risk drawing attention to us. For now, the creature seemed preoccupied with its own pursuits, leaving us alone as we navigated the tunnel's intense silence. The pain in my leg flared up again, slowing me down despite the panic gnawing at my nerves. Doubts about Tim swirled in my mind. Was he really just a child? Was Haven truly his mother? My thoughts were abruptly interrupted when a goat wandered into the tunnel behind us, its bleats echoing off the walls. I reached out to it, only to be yanked away by Tim. He pulled me along, insisting it wasn't really a goat and warning me not to trust anything in these tunnels. His words deepened my suspicion, including about him. Finally, Tim indicated we were near the exit. A sense of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. We reached a rock wall we needed to climb to escape. I was mentally preparing for the climb when I heard something, a voice calling my name from deep within the tunnels. It sounded eerily like my sister Sky. Compelled by the familiar voice, I started towards it, despite Tim's protests. He tackled me with surprising strength, but I managed to break free, drawn irresistibly towards the voice I so desperately wanted to believe was Sky's. But as I approached it, the figure that emerged was too tall, too distorted to be my sister. It was a deer-like creature, its fur mangy, ribs exposed, emitting a stench like rotting roadkill. It was using Sky's voice to lure me. Tim intervened, pulling me towards the exit. He helped me climb the rock face, but halfway up, the stench of the creature still filled my nostrils. My leg pain and the overwhelming stench clouded my mind. As we neared the top, I lost my grip and fell, my head striking the ground hard. Tim called my name, trying to rouse me, but darkness enveloped me. When I awoke, it was daylight, and a police officer named Hill stood over me. I was disoriented, lying in the woods, my leg still injured but not bandaged. I recounted my ordeal as best I could, but Tim was nowhere to be seen. Officer Hill explained that hikers had found me, and I had been missing for over 2 days. There was no sign of any boy. As paramedics prepared to take me away, a man approached Officer Hill. I recognized his flannel. It was the one Haven had put on after transforming. I tried to warn them, but my pleas fell on deaf ears, dismissed as delirium from a head injury. I was sedated and taken away in the ambulance. Officer Hill disappeared soon after and was never found. I returned to my work with the Park Service, haunted by the events and holding on to the hope that Tim would someday learn to wield his mother's dark magic for good. When he's ready to confront her, I'll be there to stand with him. I owe him that much.